All right, everyone, we're going to talk about using Procreate now. This is our digital drawing app. On the bottom of my screen here, you will see it's that black app with the little rainbow. I'm going to click on that. When I get into Procreate, you might notice that I have a whole bunch of works of art on my iPad from other students. We are not allowed to touch any of these works of art. These are works of art that are in progress from other students, and they're still working on building that project to get their grade. So please do not click on anyone else's work of art. What you need to do is click the plus mark on the top here, and that will allow you to get a new piece of paper. You will see a whole bunch of different sizes of paper. For us, we're just going to click the top one that says screen size, and that will give you a normal size of your iPad screen. Now, what I can do with my fingers, if I pull in and out, I can zoom my picture in and out. I can even rotate it around. I can even turn it upside down if I wanted to. And that will allow me to zoom into elements so that I can see them better. For example, if I made a line here, look at how far I can zoom into that line. I can even see it as far as it goes pixelated. I can zoom out to see the picture all together. And that is a really useful tool so that you can edit your art a little bit more carefully. So what I'm going to talk about first is selecting a brush. So you probably just saw me select a brush on the top here. This little button in blue here is where you will get different types of brushes. You will see that there are some normal brushes that you might recognize, things that look like pencils and pens, or things that look like normal size paintbrushes that we've used before. But then as you get down, you might see some things that are a little bit different, like there are some pattern brushes. A pattern brush, when you use it, will add a different type of pattern. A normal brush that we know about that looks kind of like a pencil or pen will just be like a normal size brush here. So these are supposed to mimic the way that a paintbrush or a pen or a pencil would be used on a piece of paper. So one thing that's kind of interesting about your brushes is if you press harder with your brush, just like on a regular piece of paper, it's going to make a darker line. If you press lighter, it's not going to make as dark of a line. Sometimes when you use your brush and you press harder on your paper, it'll even make a thicker type of line. And some brushes will do that more than others. For example, the paint brushes will kind of do that. If I press harder, it will make a thicker line. If I press lighter, it'll make a thinner line. So you can experiment with the brushes and find a brush that's right for you based on what you're drawing. Normally the sketching and inking brushes will be the best for just creating simple lines and shapes. So I'm going to use a studio pen to show you most of the details here. So one thing that I can do is I can edit my brush a bit by making it bigger and smaller. The menus on the side here, the first one is the size of the brush. If you go all the way up to 100%, that's as big as the brush can go. It can't go any bigger than that. So if I need a bigger brush than this, I would have to select a different brush. If I go all the way back down, I can go to 1%, and that's the smallest the brush can go. The next layer here, or the next bar here, is how I change the opacity of the brush. So opacity means how see-through is the brush. If my brush is very opaque, that means it's not see-through. If it's less opaque, that means it's very see-through. So you can see if I had like a 12% opacity here, my brush would be very light. I can see the other lines through it. If I went all the way up to 100%, it's very dark. I can't see anything behind the brush. So you can play around with that based on what you're drawing as well. All right, a eraser tool will allow me to erase certain parts of my work of art. It is the little rectangle here by the brush tool on the top menu. I can also change the size and the opacity of my eraser as well. So if my eraser was really teeny tiny, I would only be able to erase tiny things. If my eraser was bigger, I could erase bigger details altogether here. One part of my eraser though that I might want to be aware of is if I'm trying to erase a lot of things at one time, it might be quicker to, instead of just erasing, click the undo button. These are on the side here, the undo and redo button. If I click undo and I keep undoing, I can get all the way back to, let's just say, my first line that I made. But maybe I changed my mind and I want actually the other lines. I can redo then, the arrow down below will redo all the steps that I went through. So this might be quicker than just trying to erase your whole screen. If you just undo the line that you created, you can get back to where you were before. Okay, the smudge tool. The smudge tool might not be something that we will use a whole lot for this project that we're working on. However, the smudge tool will just allow you to kind of smudge your lines a bit. So I'm using the smudge tool on that kind of like wood type of pattern, and it's smudging it all up. So this is kind of like if I was going to take my finger and just go over my paper or my painting, it would smudge my lines. You can also change the size and the opacity of the smudge tool based on what you're trying to do. So this is kind of like shading a bit. I can kind of mix things together and make them a little bit softer and faded. Okay, layers. Layers are very important for any work of art that you're working on, and they are right here in the double square icon. You will see so far you have 2 layers. Think of layers as like a sandwich. They're all the different parts of your work of art. If I click the plus mark, I can add more layers to my work of art. And why this is important is because I can edit the layers individually now. So if I went to layer 2, and let's just say I wanted to put some blue lines in layer 2. And then maybe I wanted to have another part of a different layer, layer 3, which was a different color and a different shape altogether. Maybe I wanted to make some yellow triangles in layer 3. So I want to be able to edit these things individually for a lot of different reasons. So let's just say I have 3 layers here, 1, 2, 3, and my background layer. What I can do now is I can edit the layers individually. Let's just say, well, I really like those yellow triangles, but I'm not liking the blue lines as much. Well, instead of erasing everything in my picture, I can just click on layer 2 and I can erase things from layer 2. And as I erase things from layer 2, it will not affect my first and my third layer. It will only affect that layer. I can also move this layer around. So let's just say I click layer 2 and I go to the move tool on top here. I can move layer 2 individually from layer 1 and 3. I can also go back to layer 1 and I can move layer 1 individually. Let's just say it needs to be bigger, or maybe it just needs to be smaller. And I can individually affect those layers. I can even go to layer 3 and just say, okay, I only want to erase the triangles. I don't want to affect the background though. So I'm just going to erase the triangles and that's it. So this is really helpful because it allows me to not have to start my work of art over. It allows me to edit things very carefully individually. Now there's a couple things I can do with layers that it's a little bit more fancy. I can delete a layer. So let's just say I really just don't want the blue lines at all. I can delete that layer. So I just swiped over and I clicked the delete button. I can actually undo that. Let's just say I wanted to bring that layer back. I can undo or redo that action in the undo or redo buttons. I can move layers around. So let's just say I wanted the pink layer to actually be in front. I don't like how it's behind. I can hold it and move it up in front, and now everything else is behind that layer. I can do the same thing with the other layers. I can move them around so that they're in different spots. I can also hide a layer. Let's just say I wanted to not delete this blue layer, but I wanted to just hide it for now. I can click the check mark on the side here, and it will hide that layer for a little bit, and then I can bring it back. So that's helpful if I wanted to edit the other layers without having the distraction of having the other 2 layers there. And I can turn them back on. All right, now we're going to talk about color. You've probably seen me add colors so far, but let's just talk about all the things you can do in the color tools menu. The yellow circle up here is where I will select my color. And whatever color I'm on, it will change to that color. So this big circle on the outside of the color wheel is the hue selection. So hue means just the basic, what color am I trying to choose in the rainbow? So let's just say I wanted to use blue. Now the middle circle will allow me to change the value of the color, and value means the darkness or the lightness of the color. So if I moved this circle all the way to black, it would create darker blues. If I moved it up to white, it would create lighter blues. If I moved it all the way up to this bright blue here, that's the brightest the color can go. It's the pure hue without mixing it with black and white. So it's up to me to choose whatever colors look best within my work of art. So then I can use that color that I just chose within my work of art. Now let's just say I'm using this blue, but I really want that pink that I used before. It might be kind of tricky for me to get that pink exactly how it looked before. So a neat trick is when you hold your pencil down on your iPad, it brings up a selection color menu tool. So this will allow me to go over and scan my whole work of art and see where the colors are and select that color that I need. So I'm going to go to the pink, and you can see the pink now went right up into my color menu, and it's the exact same pink I used before, so I can keep using that same pink. I don't have to try and find it again and make the same color. All right, let's go on to adding shapes. Shapes are very important within your work of art because those are parts of the building blocks of your work of art, not just lines and colors, but also shapes. Now, if I wanted to make a shape, I can just obviously draw that shape. So let's go to black here. Let's just say I wanted to draw a triangle. I could draw just a regular triangle, but sometimes my triangle will come out a little bit crooked or my lines are not as straight. So here's how you can make a perfect triangle. If I draw with my iPad pencil and then I hold my pencil down, I don't pull it up from my screen. What that will tell my iPad is that I am trying to make a perfect shape. Triangle, circle, square, whatever I'm trying to make. And I can move that shape around and edit it. So now when I unclick, then this little box up here that says edit shape, this will also allow me to edit the parts of the shape individually with these little blue polylines. I can move parts of it in and out, and I can edit it based on exactly how I want it to look. I can do the same thing with other shapes like squares and circles. Let's just say I made a square here, hold my pencil down, and now it's making more of a perfect square that I can edit. Edit shape, and if I click rectangle here, it will go and be a perfect rectangle. And then I can edit the polylines, and then if I don't like that, I can go back to perfect rectangle. I can even move this rectangle around by going to the move tool, the little blue arrow on the top there, and I can move it around. But do you see how these are moving at the same time? That's because they're all in the same layer. So let's just say I wanted to go to a new layer and make a circle that is orange, or black rather. And then I can go to edit shape, go to click circle, it's a perfect circle now. Now I can move this by clicking the move tool. I can move this around by itself because it's in its own layer. If it was within layer 1, then all the pink would be moving with it when I click the select tool. So again, the select tool is on the top here. It's the little blue circle that's selected. It looks like an arrow, and it allows me to select things and move them around individually by themselves. I can rotate them around. I can make them bigger or smaller, move them around, whatever I need to do. I just need to make sure I'm on the correct layer based on what I'm moving. Okay. The wrench tool. The wrench tool is very important as well because it will allow me to add text and images from my iPad. So let's go over adding an image first. If I clicked insert a photo, it would take a photo that I've saved to my iPad and insert that into my picture. So I'm going to click insert a photo. I have saved from Google a picture of an owl. And what I want to do with this owl is I want to add elements of the owl to my work of art without actually having the picture in here. Because I can't just put this picture in my work of art. This is not my art. This is somebody else's photograph that they've taken. But what I can do is I can change it a bit by tracing it. So as you see, the owl was added into its own layer. I can turn it on and off. Eventually I can delete that layer. And then I'm going to go to a new layer and I'm going to trace parts of the owl. So let's just say I wanted to trace the owl's eyes red. I can go right over that owl layer and I can start to trace things. I can change my brushes based on the color that I want to trace, or I can just trace the general shapes of what I want to add from the owl. So now I can go back to the owl and I can delete it because I don't want that in there anymore. And then I can see now I have this layer 7, which is just the owl's eyes that I can add to my work of art. So you can use this as like a tracer, as a reference image, as a guide, to help you get images within your work of art that are your own. Now, if I go back to wrench, I can also add text. This will be important for you as well because you're making a logo. Go to add text, which is right below take a photo, and add a photo. And this will allow me to type from my iPad, whatever I would like to be in my work of art. Now, once I've typed what I want, I can go to edit style. It's the little blue button right here. I can change the size of the letters, the spacing of the letters. I can change if they're different styles. I can change the font of the letters. And then once I've got my letters looking how I like them, I can click done. And then if I go to select, I can even move them around. I can rotate them, I can make them bigger or smaller. And as you see in the layers menu, my text, I know it's my text because it has an A there. And the A is always a text layer. So if I'm on a text layer here, I can't actually draw on a text layer. Look what happens. This menu is going to come up when I try and draw on this layer, and it says text layer selected. It's not going to let me draw on this layer because you can't draw within a text layer. So if I wanted to add more drawing, I would have to go to a new layer and then I can start to draw some things. Now, if I go back to text layer and I click it, I can edit the text by pulling up this menu, and I can go back. Let's just say I actually didn't like that style of the text and I wanted to change it. I could go back and change the style then. I can even change the color by going to the color menu and change the color of the fonts. All right, that is all we're going to go over today. Obviously, there is more to Procreate than we have gone over, so much more. And if you notice anything else within Procreate that you would like to share with the class, raise your hand and we will add it to our notes list because there is so much more within this app that you can do. A lot more fancy tools within the adjustments here, within the wrench, that you can do within your work of art. So we will keep adding to our notes list. Oh, and I even just thought of something that I forgot to share with you. Here's one more thing that you can do. This is kind of just like a shortcut. So let's just say I made a shape within a layer. Oops, I have to go to a different layer. Within a layer here, and I wanted to fill this shape in with a color. What I can do is I can pull a color into this shape, but your shape has to be closed. Notice how my shape wasn't closed there, so I'm going to try this again. I'm going to make a perfect shape, closed. Now I want to add a color to it. I'm going to go to the color menu, pick the color I want, and then I can pull this color from the color menu and drop it into my circle. And actually I can do that for any parts of the art. I can do that within the background. If I go to this owl layer, I can do that within the owl's eyes. Let's say I wanted them to be black. I can pull black within the elements there. And so this is just a really quick way to allow me to not have to color in areas, but just drop a color into that area really quickly. But you have to be in the right layer. So if I'm not in the right layer, it's not going to allow me to add a color to that element. Okay? All right, so let's get started with our art. Again, if you think of any other tools or you see something kind of fun that you would like to share with the class, let's keep adding to our notes list.